Close your eyes. Take a slow breath in, and let it out even more slowly. Feel the weight of your body sinking into wherever you are resting right now. Your bed, your sofa, your chair. Feel the tension in your shoulders begin to soften. Feel your jaw unclench, just a little. Feel your hands relax, your fingers uncurl. You don't have to do anything tonight. You don't have to solve anything, fix anything, plan anything, or remember anything. Whatever the day left unfinished will still be there tomorrow, patient and waiting, and it will be easier to face after sleep. For now, there is nothing required of you except this, to lie still and breathe, and let these words carry you somewhere far from the noise of ordinary life. Tonight, we are going to the ocean. Not to a busy beach, not to a crowded resort, not to a harbor full of boats and noise and the smell of sunscreen. We are going somewhere wilder and deeper and older than any of that. We are going to the open sea, the real sea, the sea that covers more than 70% of this blue planet and has been here since long before the first creature crawled out of it and blinked in the unfamiliar sunlight of an ancient afternoon. The ocean. Earth's greatest secret. Earth's oldest inhabitant. Earth's most extraordinary living system. Think about what that number means for a moment, 70%. If you were looking at our planet from space, from the window of a spacecraft drifting in the dark, you would see mostly water. A blue marble, they call it, and the name is exactly right. Blue, overwhelmingly blue, with the brown and green of the continents arranged around the edges like decorations, like the trim on a garment whose main color is unmistakably the deep, shifting blue of water. We call our planet Earth. But we might just as accurately have called it ocean. Within that ocean lives the majority of all living things on this planet. More species dwell beneath the waves than walk or crawl or fly across the surface of the land. More history is preserved in the sediment of the ocean floor than in all the libraries and museums and archaeological sites that human beings have ever built or excavated or catalogued. More mountains rise from the depths of the sea than stand above sea level on land. More rivers flow, silently and invisibly, through the deep water than wind across the surface of the continents. It is a world of superlatives and extremes. A world of impossible beauty and terrible darkness. A world of creatures so strange that if you described them to someone who had never heard of the ocean, they would assume you were inventing them, combining random features from a dream. And tonight, gently and unhurriedly, we are going to explore it all. There is nothing you need to hold on to. Let each sentence wash over you like a wave, arriving and retreating, carrying you a little further from the bright noise of the day and a little closer to the soft darkness of sleep. You don't need to remember any of this. You don't need to understand all of it. You simply need to float and breathe and let the ocean come to you. Let's begin at the surface, where the water catches the last light of day and turns it into something that has no name in any language, that particular color that the sea takes on at dusk, somewhere between silver and gold and the palest possible green, shifting with every small movement of the water, never quite the same twice. It is so beautiful it almost hurts to look at. And we are going in. Imagine that you are floating. Not swimming, not treading water, not struggling to stay up. Simply floating, perfectly still and perfectly effortless, on the surface of the open ocean, far from any shore. The water beneath you is deep. So deep that if you dropped a coin from your hand it would fall for hours, sinking through layers of darkness, before it touched the bottom. But up here, at the surface, where you are floating, everything is light and warmth and gentle movement. The sun, low in the sky, touches the water all around you and turns it into something shimmering and alive. Small waves pass beneath you with a rhythm so steady and so gentle it begins, after a while, to feel like breathing. Rise and fall. Rise and fall. The ocean breathes, and you breathe with it, and the two of you are moving together in a rhythm older than language, older than thought. This upper layer of the ocean, the first 200 meters or so, where sunlight can actually penetrate and reach, has a name. Scientists call it the euphotic zone, or the sunlit zone. It is where almost all of the ocean's photosynthesis happens, where billions upon billions of tiny organisms called phytoplankton drift at the mercy of currents and winds, absorbing sunlight and turning it into energy, producing oxygen as a byproduct. And here is something that will change, quietly and permanently, the way you think about every breath you take. Half of the oxygen in Earth's atmosphere comes from the ocean. Not from forests. Not from parks and gardens. Not from the trees lining your street or the grass in the field outside town. Half of every breath you draw, right now, lying in the comfort of your bed, came from the sea. From those invisible, microscopic plants drifting in the sunlit surface water of the world's oceans, photosynthesizing quietly, producing oxygen that rises through the water and enters the atmosphere and eventually finds its way to your lungs. The ocean is breathing with you, right now, this very moment. It has been breathing with you every moment of your life. You have never once drawn a breath without the ocean's help. That is an extraordinary thing to carry in your mind as you drift toward sleep. The phytoplankton that produce all this oxygen are so small that a single teaspoon of ocean water can contain 1 million of them. They are invisible to the naked eye, yet they are the foundation upon which nearly all ocean life is built. Tiny animals called zooplankton eat the phytoplankton. Small fish eat the zooplankton. Larger fish eat the small fish. Tuna eat the larger fish. Sharks patrol the edges of the whole system, and whales move through it like slow, vast ships, filtering enormous quantities of it through their baleen plates. The entire magnificent pyramid of ocean life, from the great blue whale to the tiniest crustacean clinging to a fragment of algae, rests on those invisible drifters, those microscopic plants, those silent producers of the air we breathe. From up here, floating on the surface, you might not see any of this. The water looks clear, or perhaps faintly blue-green, or occasionally brownish-red where a bloom of phytoplankton has grown dense enough to color it. But the invisible world is there, just below the surface of what the eye can detect, going about its business with a thoroughness and dedication that puts most visible enterprises to shame. The surface of the ocean is constantly moving. Even on a calm day, there are ripples and swells, the surface responding to winds and currents happening far away, carrying energy from distant storms across thousands of miles of open water. Here is something wonderful about waves. A wave moving across the ocean is not water moving, it is energy moving through water. The water itself, the actual molecules of seawater, barely travel at all as a wave passes. They move in small circles, rising as the wave arrives and falling as it passes, ending up almost exactly where they started. The energy is what travels. The energy from a storm in the North Atlantic can travel all the way across the ocean, arriving on the shores of Europe or Africa days or weeks after the storm itself has dissipated, and the waves that carry that energy have traversed an ocean without the water itself making the journey. Think of shaking one end of a long rope. The wave you create travels down the rope to the other end, but the rope itself doesn't go anywhere. It simply transmits the energy you put into it. The ocean does the same thing, on a planetary scale, with the energy of wind and storms and submarine earthquakes and the gravitational pull of the moon. The ocean is always listening. It records everything that disturbs it, and carries the record forward through space and time. On the surface, watching carefully, you might notice things passing by. A sea turtle lifts its ancient, domed head, takes a slow breath, and disappears again below the surface without a ripple. A flying fish breaks the surface and glides, like a tiny silver airplane, for 30, 40, 50 meters before splashing back in, its large pectoral fins extended like wings, its tail still beating against the surface to add thrust. A Portuguese man-o-war sails past with its blue gas-filled float catching the wind, its long tentacles hanging meters below the surface, trailing in the blue water. The man-o-war is not, strictly speaking, a single animal. It is a colony, a cluster of different types of organism, each specialized for a different function, so completely dependent on each other that they cannot survive separately, yet so distinct from each other that they began as separate evolutionary lineages. One type of organism forms the float. Another forms the tentacles. Another digests food. Another reproduces. They live together as one thing, and yet they are many things, and the distinction between individual and colony begins to feel meaningless when confronted with such an arrangement. The ocean is full of such challenges to our ordinary categories. The light is changing. The sun is lower now, and the water has shifted from its midday blue to something richer and more complex, layers of color visible where the angle of the light reveals them, deep indigo in the troughs of the swells, lighter turquoise on the peaks, the whole surface fractured into a moving mosaic of color that no painter has ever quite captured, because it never holds still long enough to be captured. And below, the ocean deepens. 200 meters. 500. 1,000. The light fading with every meter, the temperature dropping, the pressure building. Down there, in the growing dark, another world begins. But we'll stay on the surface for a little longer. The evening is beautiful. The stars are beginning to appear, faint at first and then brighter as the sky darkens, and the water reflects them dimly, so that you seem to be floating not just on the ocean but in the middle of a field of stars, above and below and all around. Breathe in the salt air. Let the swells rock you. Rest. The open ocean, far from any coast, is the largest living space on Earth. It stretches for thousands of kilometers in every direction, and it descends for kilometers below. It is three-dimensional in a way that nothing on land truly is. Life occupies not just the surface but every level, from the sunlit top to the lightless bottom, each layer its own community, its own ecosystem, its own set of rules and adaptations and extraordinary creatures. Let us meet some of them. Let us begin with the largest. Somewhere in the deep ocean, at this very moment, a blue whale is moving through the water. You cannot hear it from where you are. Its voice is far too low, below the threshold of human hearing, a rumble and moan that travels not as sound in the air but as pressure waves through the body of the sea itself. But it is there, moving at the steady pace of about 20 kilometers per hour, vast and unhurried, following currents and temperature gradients and the chemical trails left by concentrations of krill, the tiny shrimp-like creatures that are its only food. The blue whale is the largest animal that has ever lived on this planet. Larger than any dinosaur. Larger than any creature that has walked or crawled or slithered across the surface of the Earth in the 4 billion years since life began. A large blue whale can reach 30 meters in length, longer than a tennis court. It can weigh more than 200 tons, more than 30 African elephants combined. Its heart is the size of a small car. When it beats, slowly, perhaps 5 times per minute, you could hear it from 2 miles away if you were listening underwater. Its aorta, the great vessel carrying blood from that massive heart, is wide enough that a small child could crawl through it. When it surfaces to breathe, the spout of water vapor rises 9 meters into the air, visible from miles away. And yet, for all this size, the blue whale eats almost nothing but krill, tiny, transparent, shrimp-like creatures no longer than your finger. It eats them by the ton, opening its enormous mouth and taking in thousands of gallons of water in a single gulp, then pressing the water out through the plates of baleen hanging from its upper jaw and swallowing what remains, perhaps 40 million krill in a single day during feeding season. To watch a blue whale surface is one of the most humbling experiences available to a human being. The back seems to go on forever as it arches above the surface. And then the small, perfect tail rises, that fluke, each lobe wider than a person is tall, and slides silently beneath the waves, leaving only a flat circle of calm water, a whale print, that persists for minutes after the animal has gone. The blue whale sings. Long, complex, haunting vocalizations that change over time, that spread through populations as whales hear each other and incorporate new phrases. In the era before propeller noise filled the ocean, a singing blue whale could potentially be heard by another whale on the other side of the Earth. The ocean was their telephone network, and they used it. We came close to destroying them. In the 20th century, factory whaling ships hunted blue whales to the edge of extinction. Hundreds of thousands of them were killed. By the time hunting was banned, only a few thousand remained. They are recovering, slowly, but they are still a fraction of what they once were, and the ocean is quieter for it in ways we can barely measure. Let the thought of the blue whale accompany you into sleep. That enormous, gentle, singing animal, moving through the dark water, tasting the chemical signals of the sea with its tongue, following the krill, breathing slowly at the surface, alive and present in a world that very nearly lost it. Now let us think about something entirely different in scale but equally extraordinary in its way. Jellyfish. Jellyfish have been in the ocean for at least 550 million years. Let that number settle in your mind. 550 million years. They were drifting through ancient seas before the first fish evolved. Before the first plant took root on land. Before the first insect flew. Before the dinosaurs arrived and dominated the planet and vanished. Before mammals. Before primates. Before us. They have survived every mass extinction the planet has experienced. The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs 66 million years ago. The volcanic catastrophe 250 million years ago that wiped out more than 90% of all species. Ice ages, ocean acidification events, the gradual dimming and brightening of the sun. Through all of it, the jellyfish drifted on, pulsing gently, trailing their tentacles, apparently unbothered by the great dramas happening around them. There is something deeply peaceful about watching a jellyfish move. The bell contracts and expands with a meditative rhythm, not really swimming so much as breathing, pulsing, negotiating gently with the water. The tentacles drift and trail. The whole animal moves through the water in a way that seems to belong to a different, slower kind of time. Jellyfish have no brain, no heart, no lungs, no bones, no blood in any sense we would recognize. Their bodies are 95% water, held in a transparent, gelatinous form that looks nothing so much as like a piece of living glass. They perceive their world through chemical signals and pressure, responding to food and threat in ways that seem impossibly simple for an animal that has been so extraordinarily successful for so long. One species of jellyfish has taken things a step beyond even this. It is called Turritopsis dohrnii, and scientists have given it the description immortal. When this jellyfish, no bigger than your thumbnail, grows old, or is injured, or is simply stressed by changes in its environment, it does something no other animal on Earth is known to do. It reverses its own development. Its cells transform back into an earlier state, back to the undifferentiated cells of a much younger organism, and the jellyfish essentially becomes a juvenile again, attaching itself to a surface and resuming its life from a much earlier stage. It grows again, ages again, and when it reaches that point of stress or old age, it resets again, and again, and again. In theory, this process could continue indefinitely. The immortal jellyfish does not age in the way we understand aging. It simply loops back to the beginning, over and over, potentially forever. Unless it is eaten or killed by disease, it may never die. Scientists are fascinated by the cellular mechanism that makes this possible, a process called transdifferentiation, because understanding it might unlock new approaches to understanding aging and disease in other organisms, including, perhaps, ourselves. This tiny, transparent, apparently unremarkable creature drifting in the warm Mediterranean may hold in its cells a key to one of biology's deepest questions. Out here in the open ocean, schools of fish move like single organisms. A school of Atlantic herring can contain hundreds of millions of individuals, billions of small silver fish moving together in a coordinated mass that shifts and turns and contracts and expands as if controlled by a single intelligence. There is no leader. There is no command structure. Each fish simply responds to its nearest neighbors, matching their speed and direction, and the result is this extraordinary emergent phenomenon, a collective intelligence larger and more responsive than any individual could be. When a predator attacks, the school performs maneuvers of astonishing precision. The fish nearest the predator scatter in a flash, and the opening they create ripples outward through the school in a wave of reaction that moves faster than any individual fish can consciously decide. The school writhes, divides, reforms, presents the predator with 1,000 identical targets that flash and change position faster than it can track. This is the great advantage of the collective. Alone, a herring is easy prey. Together, in their millions, they become something close to predator-proof, not because any individual is protected, but because the collective creates confusion, and confusion buys time, and time is survival. Dolphins have learned to work around this. They hunt in coordinated groups, herding schools of fish into tight balls at the surface, what marine biologists call bait balls, and then taking turns charging through the concentrated mass, snapping up fish with each pass. Gannets plunge from high above, folding their wings and entering the water like arrows at 100 km/h. Tuna strike from below. The bait ball contracts and writhes, the fish at the edges trying to push toward the center always shifting. It is one of the most spectacular events in nature. It happens constantly, invisibly, beneath the surface of the sea. Sharks deserve a chapter of their own, and they will get one. But let us meet them briefly here, in the open water, as they belong. Sharks have been in the ocean for 450 million years. They predate the dinosaurs by 200 million years. They predate trees. When sharks first appeared in the ancient seas, the land was mostly bare rock and primitive plants, and nothing more complex than a simple animal had yet made the journey from water to shore. The shark body plan has remained essentially unchanged for hundreds of millions of years, and there is a simple reason for this: it works. Evolution is not in the business of fixing things that are not broken, and the shark is about as unbroken as any design in nature. They can detect electrical fields, the tiny bioelectric signals produced by the muscle contractions of every living animal, through specialized sensory organs called the ampullae of Lorenzini, clustered around their snouts. The sensitivity of these organs is extraordinary. A shark can detect an electrical field weaker than 100 millionth of a volt, so sensitive that they can find prey buried beneath the sand by the electrical signature of its heartbeat. They can smell blood in concentrations as low as 1 part per billion, the equivalent of a single drop diluted in an Olympic-sized swimming pool. Some species can detect chemicals from miles away, following a scent trail upstream through the water with the same purposeful focus that a dog follows a trail through the air. There are more than 500 species of shark, ranging from the dwarf lantern shark, about 20 centimeters long, small enough to sit in the palm of your hand, to the whale shark, which can reach 12 meters and is the largest fish in the ocean, yet feeds only on plankton and tiny fish, entirely harmless to people. The deep ocean has its own sharks, including species that glow. The velvet belly lantern shark produces bioluminescent light from its belly, in a pattern that may serve as camouflage, matching the faint light coming from above so that, from below, it is invisible against the sky. Other deep-sea sharks are so rarely encountered that they have been described only from specimens caught in deep fishing nets, or found washed ashore, and we know almost nothing about how they live. The Greenland shark lives in the cold, dark waters of the Arctic, growing so slowly that it does not reach sexual maturity until it is about 150 years old. The largest individuals, several meters long, moving through the absolute darkness beneath Arctic ice, may be 400 years old. A Greenland shark alive today may have been born before the Mayflower sailed to America. It has been swimming through the same cold dark water through centuries of human history, unhurried, undisturbed, growing one slow centimeter at a time. Let the thought of that ancient, patient creature settle into your mind. 400 years of cold water. 400 years of quiet. Let us move now to the tropics, into warm, shallow, sunlit water, and let us find a coral reef. There. Do you see it? It begins gradually, a few scattered coral heads on the sandy bottom, perhaps at 10 or 15 meters depth. Then more. Then suddenly, unexpectedly, you are at the edge of the reef itself, and the bottom drops away below you into a forest, no, a city, of coral that extends as far as you can see in every direction. And the color. Nothing prepares you for the color. Coral comes in oranges and purples and yellows so intense they seem to emit their own light. Branching corals spread like underwater trees, each branch tipped with the living tissue of thousands of tiny animals. Massive boulder corals, as big as cars, rise from the sand, their surfaces covered in the same tiny animals arranged in their characteristic patterns. Plate corals spread in horizontal layers, and fan corals, and whip corals that stretch for meters in a single, flexible strand, bending in the current. And through all of this, the fish. Fish in colors that no artist would dare use, because they would seem too implausible. Electric blue and vivid yellow and the precise geometric black and white of butterfly fish. Parrotfish the color of a painter's accident, every shade mixed together somehow into something that shouldn't work but does. Clownfish, orange and white, darting in and out of their host anemones. Tiny neon gobies perched on coral heads, advertising themselves to potential clients with their bright blue stripes. Coral reefs cover less than 1% of the ocean floor. And yet they are home to 25% of all marine species. They are the most biologically diverse marine ecosystems on Earth, rivaling the tropical rainforests of the land for the density and variety of life they support. This improbable richness arises from the coral itself, and the coral is an improbable thing. Each coral polyp is a tiny animal, related to sea anemones and jellyfish, barely a centimeter across. It has a mouth surrounded by tentacles that it uses to catch plankton and organic particles drifting in the water. But the polyp does something else, something that makes the whole extraordinary enterprise of the reef possible. Inside its tissues, the coral polyp harbors microscopic algae called zooxanthellae. These algae photosynthesize, they use sunlight to produce energy, just as plants do on land, and they share that energy with the coral that houses them. In return, the coral provides the algae with shelter and the compounds they need for photosynthesis. It is one of the most important symbiotic relationships in the natural world, and up to 90% of the coral's energy can come from its algal partners. The brilliant colors of coral come largely from the zooxanthellae living in its tissues. A healthy coral is full of color because it is full of life. An unhealthy one that has expelled its zooxanthellae in stress, turns white. This is coral bleaching, and it is one of the most heartbreaking sights in the natural world. When you swim through a healthy reef, one of the things you might notice, if you stayed very still and looked very carefully, is the extraordinary density of interaction happening everywhere around you. Nothing on the reef is unrelated to everything else. Every species has its relationships, its dependencies, its agreements with other species that have been worked out over millions of years of coevolution. The cleaner wrasse operates cleaning stations, specific spots on the reef where larger fish come to have parasites removed from their scales, gills, and even the inside of their mouths. These small, striped fish move across the bodies of their clients with delicate precision, picking off parasites too small to see without magnification. Predators that would normally eat a fish the size of a cleaner wrasse adopt a specific posture near the cleaning station, a kind of biological signal that means, right now, truce. Even Murray eels, whose relationship with almost everything else on the reef is predatory, hold still and open their mouths wide to receive the cleaner's service. It is trust. Not the conscious, negotiated trust of human relationships, but something more ancient and more automatic, a behavioral contract written into the genes over millions of years of mutual benefit. The parrotfish goes about its remarkable business on the reef with a dedication that shapes the landscape. Its fused, beak-like teeth are built for scraping algae off coral rock. In the process, it bites off chunks of the coral skeleton, not intentionally, but as an unavoidable consequence of how it feeds. It grinds these chunks up in a second set of teeth deep in its throat, extracts what nutrition there is, and excretes the rest as fine white sand. A large parrotfish can produce several hundred kilograms of sand per year. The white sand beaches of Hawaii, the Maldives, the Caribbean, that perfect, impossibly white, impossibly fine sand that people travel across the world to walk on, is to a significant degree the excrement of parrotfish. This is not a poetic metaphor. It is a literal fact of marine biology. The beach is the reef's byproduct, and the parrotfish is the factory. Before they sleep at night, parrotfish secrete a mucus cocoon around their bodies, a sleeping bag of biological material, produced by glands in their mouths, that takes half an hour to build and envelops them completely. This cocoon is thought to mask their chemical signature from nocturnal predators that hunt by smell, and may also protect against parasites. Every morning, the parrotfish bites through its cocoon and swims out into the day, leaving the empty structure behind. Imagine sleeping inside a bubble of your own making every night, and dissolving it in the morning. The ocean finds solutions to problems we didn't know were problems. At night, the reef becomes a different place. The butterflyfish and parrotfish and surgeonfish that define the day shift retire to their sleeping spots, crevices in the coral, caves and overhangs, tucked away corners where the darkness gives them a degree of safety. Their brilliant colors fade, in some species, as if the fish themselves understand that there is no point advertising yourself while asleep. In their place, the night shift arrives. Octopuses emerge from their daytime hiding places and move across the reef in the darkness, their boneless bodies flowing through gaps and over surfaces, their skin rippling through patterns and colors constantly even in the dark. They investigate every crevice for crabs and small fish, their arms probing ahead of them, each one capable of tasting what it touches through chemoreceptors in the suckers. Lionfish hover in the water column above the coral, their elaborate spines spread wide, using the current to bring small fish to them rather than pursuing prey. They are extraordinarily patient hunters, among the most patient in the reef community, and their spines contain venom that is intensely painful to anything foolish enough to interfere with them. Crustaceans that were invisible during the day, hidden in crevices, buried in sand, tucked under ledges, emerge in the darkness and move across the reef. Spiny lobsters walk the seafloor in single file, one animal following the next in long processions for reasons not fully understood. Hermit crabs pick their way through the rubble at the reef's base, antennae moving constantly. The bioluminescence of the night reef is subtle compared to the open ocean, but it is their tiny blue-green flashes in the water column, the glow of certain dinoflagellates disturbed by movement, the occasional steady light of a bioluminescent organism resting on the coral. The reef at night is quieter than the day, but not silent. The constant crackling of snapping shrimp, tiny animals that produce shockwaves by closing a specialized claw with extraordinary speed, fills the water with a sound like static, a biological white noise that has been a constant of reef soundscapes for millions of years. This sound has a function beyond the shrimp's own predation. Young fish and invertebrate larvae, drifting in the open ocean, use the sound of a healthy reef as a navigation cue. They can hear the reef before they can see it, and they orient toward the sound, drawn back toward the place where they will settle and grow. A healthy reef is, acoustically, a beacon. A degraded reef is quieter, and quieter reefs attract fewer settlers, which makes them quieter still, and the silence deepens. The reef speaks. We have only recently learned to listen. Deeper, below the reef and the sunlit shallows. below the clear, warm, productive waters of the continental shelves. Into deeper water now, where the light is changing. The warm reds and oranges of the visible spectrum are absorbed first, then the yellows, then the greens, until only blue remains, a cold, pure, penetrating blue that seems to carry no warmth at all, that deepens and darkens with every meter you descend. At 200 meters, even the blue is fading. At 300 meters, it has become something barely distinguishable from darkness. At 400 meters, for all practical purposes, it is night. This is the twilight zone, the mesopelagic layer, and it stretches from about 200 meters to 1,000 meters beneath the surface. It is perpetually cold, 5 to 10 degrees Celsius regardless of the season or the conditions at the surface far above. It is under significant pressure. At 400 meters, the pressure is 40 times what you experience at sea level, and the creatures that live here have evolved accordingly. Every day, in the twilight zone, something remarkable happens. The largest animal migration on Earth. Not the wildebeest migration across the Serengeti. Not the monarch butterflies crossing North America. Not the millions of birds moving along ancient flyways between breeding and wintering grounds. The largest daily migration of living things on Earth happens right here, in the dark water, invisible and unwitnessed by almost any human eye. As darkness falls at the surface each evening, billions of small fish, squid, and crustaceans begin to rise from the twilight zone toward the surface. They travel hundreds of meters upward through the water column, moving into the productive upper ocean to feed under the cover of night, exploiting the rich plankton and smaller animals that live there, taking the food and beginning the descent again before dawn reveals them to the larger predators of the sunlit world. This daily vertical migration involves more living mass than any other migration on Earth. It is, in a profound sense, the heartbeat of the ocean, the daily pulse of life moving up and down through the water column, carrying nutrients from the surface into the deep, connecting the two worlds in a continuous flow of energy. The creatures that make this journey are extraordinary. Lanternfish, small, dark, a few centimeters long, covered in tiny bioluminescent dots called photophores, are perhaps the most numerous vertebrates on Earth. There may be hundreds of millions of tons of them in the ocean's twilight zone. When they gather near the surface at night, feeding on plankton, they create concentrations of life so dense that early sonar systems mistook them for the seafloor, a false bottom, appearing on charts at a certain depth, then vanishing as the fish descended at dawn. This confusing layer was called the deep scattering layer, and for years, no one knew what it was. Bioluminescence, the production of light by living organisms through chemical reactions, is the dominant form of illumination in the twilight zone and the deep ocean below it. It is estimated that 90% of all creatures in these waters produce their own light. They use it for camouflage, for communication, for attracting prey, for finding mates in the vast, dark, empty space of the deep. The light produced is usually blue or green, the wavelengths that travel most effectively through seawater. A creature producing red light in the deep ocean is effectively invisible, because red light is absorbed before it can travel far. Some deep-sea predators have evolved red-sensitive eyes and produce red bioluminescent light, giving them a private channel of illumination that their prey cannot detect, hunting in a wavelength that is, for all practical purposes, invisible to everything except themselves. Imagine swimming through the twilight zone at midnight. The darkness around you is profound, yet it is not empty. In every direction, small lights flash and pulse, the photophores of a passing school of lanternfish, the glow of a siphonophore, the steady blue-green luminescence of a squid's mantle. Something large and dark drifts past, and as it turns, a wave of bioluminescent light ripples across its surface. The water itself seems to be thinking, pulsing with cold fire, full of signals and messages in a language we cannot read. The anglerfish lives here, in the twilight zone and below, and it deserves to be described in detail because it is one of the most remarkable examples of evolutionary problem-solving in the natural world. The female anglerfish, the large, menacing one you have probably seen in illustrations, hangs in the dark water with her lure extended from a modified spine on her head, a fleshy protuberance tipped with a glowing lure of bioluminescent tissue that she can move and wiggle, mimicking the movement of small prey. In the complete darkness of the deep ocean, anything that glows is potentially food, and small fish are drawn toward the light. When they come close enough, the anglerfish's enormous jaws snap shut. She can swallow prey twice her own size. Her stomach is elastic, her jaws and body flexible enough to accommodate a meal larger than herself. She lives in the dark, moves slowly to conserve energy, and waits for food to come to her, a strategy that makes extraordinary sense in an environment where encounters with prey are infrequent and every calorie counts. The male anglerfish is a different creature entirely. He is tiny, often less than a centimeter long, a small fraction of the female's size. He cannot produce bioluminescent light. He has poor hunting abilities. He has, from the perspective of biology, one purpose. When he hatches, he begins searching for a female, using his highly sensitive olfactory organs to detect chemical signals in the water. When he finds one, he bites into her body and holds on. His tissues begin to fuse with hers. His circulatory system connects to her bloodstream. His organs, no longer needed independently, begin to atrophy. His digestive system, his eyes, eventually everything except his reproductive organs. He becomes, over time, little more than a pair of gonads attached to the female's body, nourished by her blood, providing sperm on demand. A single large female anglerfish has been found with 8 males fused to her body, in various stages of integration. This is evolution's solution to a specific problem: how to find a mate in the vast, dark, empty expanse of the deep ocean, where the chances of encountering another individual of your own species are vanishingly small. Once you find one, you do not let go. The solution is extreme. It is, by any human standard, bizarre. But it works, and in the economy of the deep ocean, working is everything. The twilight zone is full of creatures designed for life on the edge of darkness. Many have enormous eyes that take up a disproportionate fraction of the head, built to gather every possible photon of the faint light filtering down from above. The giant squid has eyes 30 centimeters across, the largest of any living animal, evolved not for the surface world but for the darkness, designed to detect the bioluminescent flashes of the sperm whales that hunt it in the deep. Many Twilight Zone creatures are dark, deep brown or black, colors that absorb rather than reflect the faint ambient light, making them difficult to see from any direction. Some are transparent, their bodies so clear that the water can be seen through them, their organs the only visible parts. Some are red, that invisible wavelength, hiding in plain sight in a spectrum that most of their neighbors cannot detect. Some have light organs on their bellies that they use for counter-illumination, producing light that matches the faint illumination from the surface above them, so that to a predator looking upward, they are invisible against the background brightness, their silhouettes erased by their own bioluminescence. The arms race between predator and prey in the Twilight Zone has been running for hundreds of millions of years, and it has produced innovations that still astonish the biologists who study them. Let the cold blue light of the Twilight Zone settle around you now. Feel the pressure, gentle, even, all-encompassing, like being held by the water itself. Let your breathing slow to the rhythm of this deeper, quieter world. Below 1,000 meters, the ocean crosses a threshold. The Twilight Zone ends. The Midnight Zone begins, the bathypelagic layer, stretching from 1,000 to 4,000 meters, and below that the Abyssal Zone, and below that, in the deepest ocean trenches, the Hadal Zone. These are named for increasing depths of darkness, and the names have the right flavor of mythology, the right sense of descent into a world beyond ordinary experience. Here there is no light at all. None. Not one photon from the sun penetrates to this depth. The concept of day and night does not exist here. Seasons are irrelevant. Storms at the surface are events in a different universe. The temperature is near freezing, a few degrees above zero, and it will stay that way regardless of what happens at the surface. The pressure is crushing by any human standard, though the creatures that have evolved here do not experience it as pressure any more than we experience the weight of the atmosphere pressing down on us. It simply is the constant condition of existence. And yet, life. The seafloor at abyssal depths, 3,000 to 6,000 meters below the surface, covers more area than all the continents combined. It is the largest habitat on Earth. For a long time, scientists assumed it was nearly lifeless, a cold desert of mud, too far from the sun's energy, too cold, too pressurized, to support much of anything. Then they looked. Really looked. And they found a world. The abyssal plain is not lifeless. It is populated by hundreds of species of worms and crustaceans and sea cucumbers and brittle stars and fish and sponges and microbes, many of them found nowhere else on Earth, many of them never described or named by science. It is possible, it is likely, that the deep seafloor represents the last great unexplored wilderness on Earth, a realm of life as diverse and complex as a tropical forest, hidden in the cold and dark, visited less frequently than the surface of the moon. We have better maps of Mars than of our own ocean floor. Consider what that means. We know the features of a planet 40 million kilometers away in greater detail than we know the bottom of the sea we sail across every day, that covers 70% of our own world, that we depend on for our weather and our oxygen and our food. The deep ocean is our nearest unexplored frontier, and we have barely begun to explore it. In 1977, researchers diving near the Galapagos Islands found something that changed biology. At a depth of nearly 2.5 kilometers, in water that should have been cold and dark and largely lifeless, their cameras revealed something that made no sense in the context of what biology understood at the time. Around cracks in the seafloor, fissures where the ocean crust was spreading apart, where magma heated the water below, there was life. Not just life, but a riot of life. Dense, diverse, extraordinary life, existing in the complete absence of sunlight, in superheated water laced with chemicals toxic to most organisms. Tube worms 3 meters long waved their red plumes in the mineral-laden water. They had no mouths, no digestive systems, no way of eating in any conventional sense. Giant clams, white as chalk, clustered in dense beds. Ghostly crabs picked their way through the worm forest. Fish hovered in the warm plumes. All of it was powered not by sunlight but by chemistry, by the hydrogen sulfide and other compounds pouring from the vents, which bacteria could oxidize to produce energy. The bacteria lived in the tissues of the tube worms and the gills of the clams, providing energy through chemosynthesis just as land plants provide energy through photosynthesis. This was the discovery that life does not need sunlight. That an entire ecosystem, complex, diverse, productive, could exist powered entirely by the heat and chemistry of the planet's interior, independent of the star that all other known life depended on. It was a discovery that rewrote the rules. If life can exist in conditions this extreme, without sunlight, what other extreme environments might support life, on Earth or elsewhere in the universe? The icy oceans of Europa, one of Jupiter's moons, are thought to be kept liquid by tidal heating from Jupiter's gravity. Could hydrothermal vents exist there, powered by similar forces? Could life have evolved around them? The tube worms of the hydrothermal vents opened a door in our imagination that has not closed since. The vents themselves are extraordinary structures. Black smokers, chimneys of precipitated minerals that can grow as tall as a 15-story building, belch superheated water at temperatures above 400 degrees Celsius into the surrounding ocean. At the crushing pressure of the deep, water does not boil at 100 degrees as it does at the surface. It remains liquid at far higher temperatures, and the black smoker water is as hot as the inside of an oven. White smokers are cooler, and the communities around them are often even more diverse than those around the black smokers. The base of the vent community, the bacteria performing chemosynthesis, are eaten by the tube worms and clams that evolved to house them, which are eaten by the predatory crabs and fish that have migrated to the vents from the surrounding seafloor. Vent communities are isolated islands in the deep ocean. Each vent system is separated from others by vast distances of cold abyssal plain, and the communities that develop around each one are to some extent distinct, their own evolutionary experiments, running in parallel, finding different solutions to the same challenges. Some species are found at multiple vent systems, dispersed through the deep ocean currents over millions of years. Others are endemic, found only at a single vent system, found nowhere else on Earth. When a vent dies, when the geological processes that heat the water shift and the chimney goes cold, the community that depended on it must either move or perish. How they move, how larvae from a dying vent find new ones across vast distances of dark ocean, is one of the deep ocean's open questions. The deepest place on Earth is in the western Pacific Ocean. The Challenger Deep, in the Mariana Trench, reaches a depth of approximately 11 kilometers below the surface. To put that in perspective, the summit of Mount Everest stands at less than 9 kilometers above sea level. If you placed Everest at the bottom of the Challenger Deep, there would be more than 2 kilometers of water above its peak. In 1960, the submersible Trieste descended to the Challenger Deep for the first time in human history. The descent took nearly 5 hours. Two men, Don Walsh and Jacques Piccard, sat inside a small steel sphere at the bottom of the vessel, in the cold and the dark, in a place no human had ever been, under a pressure of more than 1,000 atmospheres. They turned on the exterior lights and looked out. A flatfish was resting on the seafloor. Life, at the very deepest point on Earth. Under pressure that would crush any unprotected human body instantly. In absolute darkness. In near-freezing cold. A fish, resting on the mud, apparently entirely at ease. Life does not give up easily. Since 1960, we have learned more about the Hadal Zone, the name given to the deepest parts of the ocean, the trenches below 6,000 meters. Amphipods, small crustaceans related to shrimp, some translucent, some white, many no more than a few centimeters long, crowd the trenches in numbers that were not expected. They have been filmed in dense aggregations on the seafloor, feeding on the organic material that sinks to these depths, marine snow, the bodies of dead animals, anything that gravity delivers from the world above. Snailfish, deep-sea relatives of the common snailfish found in shallower water, have been photographed at depths of more than 8 kilometers, making them the deepest living vertebrates known to science. They are strange, pale, somewhat translucent, with large heads and tapering bodies, and they move through the water with a gentle undulation that seems entirely unsuited to survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Yet there they are, thriving, feeding on the amphipods, doing exactly what fish do. The deep ocean has adapted to us as quickly as we have found it. Plastic waste has been found in the Challenger Deep. Microplastics have been detected in the bodies of amphipods from the deepest trenches. The remotest place on Earth is not remote from the consequences of human activity. Let that thought rest very lightly in your mind, and then let it go. The trenches are still there. The amphipods are still moving across the mud. The snailfish are still drifting through the dark water. The Challenger Deep is 11 kilometers below the surface, and tonight, that is enough. Tonight, we are simply passing through, on our way to sleep. The floor of the ocean is not a featureless plain of mud. It has a landscape as varied and dramatic as anything on the surface of the continents: mountain ranges, valleys, plains, plateaus, volcanoes, canyons, and geological features that dwarf anything visible above sea level. The mid-ocean ridge system is the longest mountain range on Earth. It stretches for 65,000 kilometers, winding through every ocean basin, circling the globe like the seam on a baseball. It is here that new seafloor is continuously being created. As the great tectonic plates that make up the ocean crust spread apart, molten rock rises from below and fills the gap, cooling into new basalt. The ocean floor is a slow conveyor belt, moving away from the ridges, carrying everything on its surface, descending back into the Earth's mantle at subduction zones near the continents. The mountains of the mid-ocean ridge can rise thousands of meters from the surrounding plain. In the Atlantic Ocean, the Mid-Atlantic Ridge runs almost exactly down the center of the ocean, and it is responsible for the fact that South America and Africa, which fit together so neatly on a map that children notice it when they first look at a globe, were once the same continent. The Atlantic Ocean itself is a young ocean, geologically speaking, still widening by a few centimeters each year as the ridge produces new seafloor. Iceland is a piece of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge that has been built up by volcanic activity to the point where it breaks the surface and becomes an island. Sitting on the ridge, Iceland is geologically one of the most active places on Earth. Volcanoes erupting, geysers spouting, the land itself slowly pulling apart along the ridge-spreading axis. If you flew over Iceland in the right conditions, you could see where the two tectonic plates are pulling apart. A valley, a rift, cutting through the landscape, the actual boundary between the North American plate and the Eurasian plate, the place where the Atlantic Ocean is being born, 1 centimeter at a time. Seamounts are mountains on the ocean floor that don't quite reach the surface. There are tens of thousands of them, scattered across the ocean basins, rising from the abyssal plain in isolated peaks. Each one is, in effect, a biological island. A raised structure in the middle of the ocean where currents are deflected and intensified, where cold, nutrient-rich water is forced upward along the flanks, creating a local upwelling that can sustain extraordinary concentrations of life. Around a seamount, corals grow on the rocky flanks, deep-water corals, growing in cold, dark water far below the sunlit zone, building complex three-dimensional structures that take centuries to form and provide habitat for hundreds of species of fish and invertebrates. Fish congregate in the water column above the seamount, attracted by the upwelling and the food it brings. Sharks and tuna patrol the currents, hunting the fish. Seabirds dive from the surface. Each seamount is unique, and many support species found nowhere else in the world. They are biological hotspots in the middle of the open ocean, oases of life in the biological desert of the deep sea surrounding them. They are also, because of the fish they attract, targets for deep-sea fishing. Bottom trawling, dragging enormous weighted nets across the seafloor, has devastated seamount communities in many parts of the world, destroying in hours what centuries built. The cold water corals that provided habitat for so many species do not grow back on human timescales. A seamount community destroyed by trawling may take 500 years to recover. But there are seamounts that have never been trawled, remote, deep, difficult to access, where the communities of life are intact, and where the diversity of species may include things unknown to science. Every expedition to unexplored seamounts discovers new species. Every camera lowered to the seafloor of an unstudied area returns images of things that have no names. The ocean floor is full of names waiting to be given. Submarine canyons cut through the continental shelves like enormous undersea versions of their land-based cousins. The Monterey Canyon, off the coast of California, is as deep as the Grand Canyon and far longer, its walls rising hundreds of meters from the canyon floor to the rim on either side. It was carved by rivers during the last ice age, when sea levels were more than 100 meters lower than today, when what is now the continental shelf was dry land, and rivers ran across it to the sea's edge. As the ice ages ended and sea levels rose, the canyons were drowned and became part of the seafloor, their shapes preserved almost perfectly in the sediment. Submarine canyons funnel cold, nutrient-rich water from the deep ocean up onto the continental shelf, creating local upwellings that sustain highly productive ecosystems. The Monterey Canyon is one of the most productive marine environments off the California coast, supporting enormous populations of fish, seabirds, marine mammals, and invertebrates. The cold, nutrient-rich water it brings to the surface feeds plankton blooms that cascade up the food chain to the whales and dolphins and sea lions that draw visitors to the Monterey Bay Aquarium from around the world. The Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, operating from the same town, has sent research submersibles into the canyon for decades, and every dive brings back new observations. The canyon is deep enough and cold enough that it supports communities found nowhere else on the California coast, and its walls and floor are home to species adapted to the specific conditions of canyon life: the strong currents, the cold temperatures, the high organic matter input from above. The sediment of the deep ocean floor is one of the most detailed records of Earth's history available anywhere on the planet. It accumulates slowly, in some areas only a centimeter or two per thousand years, but it accumulates continuously, and each layer represents a snapshot of the conditions in the ocean and atmosphere at the time it was deposited. The microscopic shells of tiny organisms called foraminifera, unicellular animals that build intricate, species-specific shells of calcium carbonate, rain down from the surface and accumulate in the sediment. Different species of foraminifera thrive at different temperatures, and the presence or absence of particular species in a sediment layer tells scientists the approximate sea surface temperature at that time. The chemistry of the shells tells them more. The ratio of different isotopes of oxygen in the shells reflects the temperature and volume of ice on Earth at the time they formed, because when ice caps grow, they preferentially lock up the lighter isotope of oxygen, leaving the heavier one more concentrated in the ocean. By analyzing the isotopic composition of foraminifera shells in cores drilled from the seafloor, scientists can reconstruct the history of Earth's ice ages in remarkable detail. These cores are the planet's diary. They record ice ages and warm periods, asteroid impacts and volcanic supereruptions, the rise and fall of ocean productivity, the chemistry of ancient atmospheres. The sediment doesn't lie, doesn't simplify, doesn't omit inconvenient details. It simply records, layer by layer, in extraordinary detail, the story of the planet as it has unfolded over tens of millions of years. The ocean holds more history than all the museums of the world. Since the first humans sailed, ships have been sinking. Storms, wars, navigational errors, structural failures, fires, and the simple weight of years have sent tens of thousands of vessels to the bottom of the sea, carrying their cargoes, their passengers, their weapons, and their stories with them. The ocean has kept these things in ways that the land cannot match. On the land, wood rots. Iron corrodes. Organic materials decompose. The work of microbes and weather and time reduces almost everything to its component elements, and after a few centuries, the record is fragmentary or gone. But in the cold, oxygen-poor water of the deep, the chemistry of decay slows dramatically. Wood survives. Rope survives. Leather, cloth, amphora, coins, weapons, tools, things that would crumble on land in a generation or two can survive in the sea for centuries. Ancient Greek and Roman merchant ships still rest on the floor of the Mediterranean, their hulls in varying states of preservation, their cargoes of amphoras still recognizable, their ballast stones scattered across the seafloor. Some still have their cargo intact, jars of wine or olive oil or fish sauce, sealed with clay stoppers that are still in place after 2,000 years. The chemical contents have long since been replaced by seawater, but the containers themselves survive, and the stamps and inscriptions on them still legible, telling us where they were made and who they belong to. A Bronze Age shipwreck found off the coast of Uluburun in Turkey, dating to the 14th century before the Common Era, was carrying a cargo so diverse it looked like an inventory of the ancient world's most valuable commodities. Copper ingots from Cyprus. Tin from unknown sources in the east. Glass ingots from the Levant. Ebony logs from tropical Africa. Hippopotamus ivory. Egyptian gold rings. Canaanite amphora. A golden scarab bearing the name of Nefertiti, wife of the pharaoh Akhenaten. This ship was trading across the entire eastern Mediterranean world 3,300 years ago, connecting civilizations that barely knew of each other's existence from a land perspective, carrying the materials that built the Bronze Age, sailing routes that were already ancient before the ship was built. The ocean floor keeps these things safe. The ocean floor is the greatest museum in the world. Entire cities have been lost to the sea. As sea levels have risen and fallen over millennia, responding to the growth and retreat of ice caps, to the subsidence of the land, to the geological processes that lift and lower the crust, settlements that were once above water have been drowned, and settlements that were once under water have become dry land. Pavlopetri, off the southern coast of Greece, is one of the oldest known submerged cities. Its streets and buildings lie in just 3 or 4 meters of water, visible to anyone who swims over them, a complete town plan, with roads and houses and courtyards, dating back at least 5,000 years. The city was submerged gradually, over centuries, as the land subsided, and it went down so gently that the structures were preserved intact. Walking, or swimming, through Pavlopetri is to move through a city that was active at the same time as the first Egyptian dynasties, as Stonehenge as the earliest writing. A city built by people who had names and families and daily concerns and knew nothing of the world that would come after them. The ancient port of Alexandria, founded by Alexander the Great in the 4th century before the Common Era, partly lies beneath the harbor waters of modern Alexandria. Earthquakes and subsidence drowned the harbor area over the centuries, taking with it the royal quarter of the Ptolemaic city, the palaces, the temples, the royal shipyards. Divers working in the murky waters of the modern harbor have found monumental statues, sphinx fragments, columns, granite obelisks, the foundations of ancient buildings, all resting on the seafloor in a few meters of water, within sight of the modern city that was built on the ruins of the old one. Whether the famous Library of Alexandria, the greatest collection of knowledge in the ancient world, destroyed in circumstances still debated by historians, left any physical trace that might rest on that seafloor, we do not know. If it did, it has not yet been found. The ocean holds secrets of this kind, secrets with answers, if we can only find and read them. Beneath the surface in other parts of the world, structures have been found that raise questions that have not yet been answered to everyone's satisfaction. Off the coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island, at a depth of about 5 to 40 meters, there is an underwater rock formation that has divided opinions since its discovery in 1986. Its most prominent feature is a stepped structure, a series of flat platforms and vertical faces arranged in a way that some researchers describe as clearly artificial, the work of human hands, while others argue it is entirely natural, the product of geological processes acting on a rock that tends to cleave along regular planes. The question is not fully resolved. The formation is in an area where humans certainly lived during lower sea levels of the last ice age. If the structure is artificial, if those steps and platforms were carved by people, it would make Yonaguni one of the oldest constructed monuments in the world, predating the Egyptian pyramids by thousands of years. If it is natural, it is still a remarkable geological formation. The debate continues. The ocean is not finished surprising us with its history. Long before the first written word, the ocean shaped the story of humanity. We evolved on the shores of oceans and lakes. The coastlines of Africa, where our species took its earliest steps, are varied and rich, tidal zones full of shellfish and fish and crustaceans, a reliable and protein-rich food source that some anthropologists believe played a significant role in the dietary changes that drove the expansion of the human brain. The midden heaps, the ancient rubbish dumps of coastal communities that line shorelines around the world testify to tens of thousands of years of dependence on the sea. Shell mounds in South Africa date back more than 100,000 years. Shell heaps in Denmark, where Stone Age communities returned to the same coastal locations for thousands of years, are so large they show up on maps as topographic features. In Brazil, Japan, Australia, and on the coasts of almost every inhabited continent, these archives of ancient marine meals preserve the record of humanity's long relationship with the sea. Our relationship with the ocean was not just about food. It was about transport, about communication, about the movement of ideas across water. The Polynesian settlement of the Pacific is perhaps the greatest feat of exploration in human history. Between roughly 2,000 and 1,000 years ago, Polynesian navigators in double-hulled sailing canoes crossed the vast Pacific Ocean, the largest geographic feature on Earth, and settled every habitable island they found, from Hawaii to New Zealand to Easter Island to the hundreds of atolls and islands scattered across the Central Pacific. These voyages were made without instruments, without compasses, without charts in any form we would recognize. Navigation was accomplished by reading the ocean itself, the shape and direction of swells that carry information about distant islands and weather systems, the behavior of clouds that tend to form preferentially over land, the species of birds that indicate proximity to shore, the stars whose positions were memorized with extraordinary precision, the temperature and color and taste of the water. Polynesian navigators spoke of reading the sea the way a scholar reads a text. They lay in the bottom of their canoes at night, feeling the swells through the hull, detecting the subtle perturbations caused by distant islands that reflect and refract the swells differently than open water. They navigated by feel, by accumulated knowledge, by a relationship with the ocean developed over generations and encoded in oral tradition and in the practice of apprenticeships that began in childhood. These were not accident. These were deliberate voyages of exploration and colonization, made with extraordinary skill and confidence, to destinations that the navigators knew existed even before they set out, because the ocean itself had told them so. Trade followed the explorers, and the ocean became the world's greatest highway. For most of human history, the most efficient way to move large quantities of goods was by sea. A ship could carry more than any cart or pack animal, required no road to be built across it, and was powered by the wind, effectively free energy from the atmosphere. The sea connected places that were otherwise isolated, and what flowed along those connections, goods, people, diseases, ideas, art, religion, language, transformed civilizations on every shore. The ancient Mediterranean was a network of sea routes as complex and busy as any modern road system. Phoenician traders sailed from their home ports in what is now Lebanon to every corner of the Mediterranean basin, establishing colonies and trading posts along the way. Egyptian grain fed the populations of Rome. Wine and olive oil traveled from Greek colonies in the western Mediterranean back to Greece. Metals and luxury goods, slaves and textiles, grain and pottery moved constantly across the blue waters between the continents. When Rome rose to dominate the Mediterranean, the sea became its highway of empire. Grain from Egypt and North Africa arrived in the ports of Ostia and fed 1 million people in the capital. Amphorae of wine and fish sauce and olive oil have been found on the floor of the Mediterranean in such quantities that their distribution maps essentially recreate the trade patterns of the Roman world. And then came the spices. Pepper from India, cinnamon from Sri Lanka, nutmeg and cloves from the spice islands of what is now Indonesia. These flavors, which we buy in supermarkets today without a second thought, were once so valuable that they reshaped the history of the world. The desire of European rulers and merchants for these spices, which preserved food, flavored it, made it edible through long winters before refrigeration, and served as medicines and prestige goods, drove the greatest age of ocean exploration the world has ever seen. Columbus sailed west to find the East Indies. Vasco da Gama rounded the Cape of Good Hope. Magellan's expeditions circumnavigated the globe. The ocean routes they opened, routes that followed currents and winds discovered through experience and error, became the first truly global trading network, connecting the Americas to Europe to Africa to Asia in a web of exchanges that transformed every continent it touched. The ocean also carried suffering. The Atlantic slave trade, conducted across the ocean between the 16th and 19th centuries, was among the greatest crimes in human history. Approximately 12 million people were enslaved in Africa, loaded onto ships in conditions of unimaginable brutality, and transported across the Atlantic to work on plantations in the Americas. Millions died at sea. Those who survived the crossing faced lives of forced labor and systematic dehumanization. The ocean was the medium through which this crime was conducted, and the ocean floor holds its evidence: the wrecks of slave ships lost at sea, some of them now being located and studied by archaeologists, their stories contributing to our understanding of a history that many have tried to suppress or minimize. The ocean does not suppress or minimize. It simply preserves. The consequences of the slave trade, economic, cultural, social, political, are still present in the world today. The ocean carried an act whose effects cannot be undone, only acknowledged and addressed. Let us return, now, from history to wonder. Let us find ourselves, again, on the open ocean at night, far from any shore, far from any artificial light. The sky above us is ablaze with stars, the Milky Way so dense and bright it casts shadows, the familiar constellations mixed with thousands of stars too faint to see from a light-polluted city, the whole sky so intensely, overwhelmingly full that it takes your breath. And below you, as you trail your hand through the water, the sea glows. A blue-green light, soft and cold, traces the path your fingers make through the water. The bow wave of the boat glows. The wake glows. Where something disturbs the water, light blooms and fades, like slow breathing. Dolphins plunging through the waves at night trail streamers of fire. This is bioluminescence. The production of light by living organisms through chemical reactions involving a molecule called luciferin and an enzyme called luciferase. The reaction is remarkably efficient. It produces almost no heat, only light, which is why it is sometimes called cold light. It is among the most common phenomena in the natural world, occurring in bacteria, fungi, fish, squid, jellyfish, worms, crustaceans, and dozens of other groups, and it has evolved independently at least 40 separate times across the tree of life. The most common source of the bioluminescence visible at the ocean's surface is not a single species but a community of single-celled organisms called dinoflagellates. These microscopic creatures drift in the upper ocean in their billions, and when disturbed by wave action or the movement of a boat or an animal through the water, they produce a brief flash of blue-green light. The light is their response to turbulence, thought to function as a startle response that might deter predators or attract the predators of their predators, creating a protective distraction. On beaches where dinoflagellate populations are dense enough, breaking waves glow blue in the darkness. Footprints in wet sand light up. A hand drawn through the shallows leaves a luminous wake that persists for a few seconds before fading. It is one of the most magical things that happens in the natural world, and it happens on coastlines all over the world, most dramatically in warm, calm, dark conditions. Deeper in the ocean, bioluminescence is not an occasional phenomenon but the primary form of illumination. In the twilight zone and below, where sunlight never reaches, the darkness is not complete darkness. It is a darkness punctuated constantly by cold light, produced by the organisms that inhabit it. At any given moment in the deep ocean, there are flashes of blue and green in every direction. The photophores of passing fish, the glow of a jellyfish, the bioluminescent lure of an anglerfish, the counterillumination of a squid erasing its own silhouette. For the creatures of the deep, light is a medium of communication and deception, of predation and escape. The arms race between predator and prey has driven the evolution of extraordinary diversity in both bioluminescent production and bioluminescent detection. Some fish have evolved eyes with special filters that allow them to detect red bioluminescent light, a wavelength that most deep-sea creatures cannot see, because it is absorbed by water before it can travel very far. These fish produce red bioluminescent light from organs near their eyes, illuminating their world in a wavelength invisible to their prey. They hunt in plain sight, in a light that their prey are literally blind to. Some shrimp, when threatened, squirt a cloud of bioluminescent material from glands near their mouths, a luminous decoy, a cloud of light released into the water to distract or confuse a predator while the shrimp escapes into the darkness. This is bioluminescent countermeasure, using light not to see or to attract, but to confuse, to misdirect, to buy the seconds needed for escape. Some deep-sea jellyfish produce bioluminescent light when they are disturbed, not as a direct defense, but as an alarm system. The light they produce may attract larger predators, which follow the light to its source and find not the jellyfish that produced it but whatever larger predator was bothering the jellyfish. The jellyfish summons help it didn't know it was summoning. Evolution, as ever, is ingenious. On some beaches around the world, on certain conditions of tide and temperature and plankton density, the surf itself glows. Bioluminescent beaches have been reported from the Maldives, from Puerto Rico, from California, from Vietnam, from Tasmania. Under the right conditions, the breaking waves are lit from within by blue fire, and footprints in the wet sand glow briefly before fading. It is a phenomenon as ancient as the sea, noticed and recorded by sailors and fishermen and beachcombers for as long as people have walked near the ocean at night. The phenomenon is created by Noctiluca scintillans, sea sparkle, a dinoflagellate that feeds on other plankton and accumulates in certain conditions to form blooms dense enough to make the water visibly luminescent. Like all bioluminescent dinoflagellates, it produces light when disturbed, and in a wave breaking on a beach, millions of them are disturbed simultaneously, creating the ghostly blue fire that lights the surf. Imagine lying on such a beach at night, the stars overhead and the glowing waves at your feet, the sound of the sea and the cold light of living things in the water, breathing slowly in the salt air, your body perfectly at rest. That is a version of tonight. That is the quality of the rest available to you right now, if you let yourself settle into it. Every year, billions of animals move through the ocean, following routes mapped not in any atlas but written into their own biology, encoded in genes shaped by millions of years of evolutionary refinement. These journeys are among the most extraordinary navigational achievements of any creature on Earth. The Arctic tern makes the longest migration of any known animal. It breeds in the Arctic during the northern summer, then flies to the Antarctic for the southern summer, following an S-shaped route that takes advantage of global wind patterns, and then returns. A round trip of more than 70,000 kilometers, twice a year, every year of a life that can last 30 years or more. In a lifetime, an Arctic tern may travel 3 million kilometers. 3 trips to the moon and back. It navigates this journey across 2 of the planet's most extreme and featureless environments, open ocean, ice, wind, storm, without instruments, using the sun, the stars, the Earth's magnetic field, and perhaps other cues we have not yet identified. It arrives, after months of travel, at exactly the right beach on exactly the right island in exactly the right ocean, because that is where the conditions are right, and the tern's biology knows this with precision that we are still struggling to understand. Sea turtles navigate using the Earth's magnetic field. They can detect both the intensity and the inclination of the magnetic field, 2 variables that together create a unique magnetic signature for almost every location on Earth, a magnetic address. By reading this address, a turtle can determine where it is and navigate toward where it needs to be. Leatherback sea turtles, the largest of all sea turtles, as old a lineage as the dinosaurs, have been tracked making migrations of extraordinary length and precision. One leatherback, fitted with a satellite tracking device, was followed from its nesting beach in Papua New Guinea all the way across the Pacific to feeding grounds off the coast of Oregon, a journey of more than 20,000 kilometers. It made this journey without getting lost. Without maps. Without instruments. using the magnetic field of the Earth as a guidance system, the same magnetic field that navigators use compasses to detect, except that the turtle detects it with organs we have not yet fully identified, using mechanisms we do not fully understand. Female sea turtles return to the beach where they were born to lay their own eggs, sometimes after decades spent ranging across ocean basins. The beach they return to may be the same beach their mothers returned to, and their mothers before them, in an unbroken chain of returns stretching back to before humans existed. The magnetic signature of the natal beach is imprinted on the hatchling as it makes its way from the nest to the water for the first time. That imprint is carried for the rest of the turtle's life. 20 years later, 50 years later, the turtle navigates back to that signature, to a beach that may have changed beyond recognition in physical terms but that still carries the same magnetic address it had when the turtle first crossed it. Salmon perform a different kind of migration, in the other direction. Born in cold, clear freshwater streams in the mountains or foothills, they spend the first weeks or months of their lives in freshwater before making the transition to salt water and migrating out to the ocean, where they feed and grow for years. Then, when the time comes, they return. They find their way back to the exact stream, sometimes the exact tributary, the exact pool, where they were born. They navigate thousands of kilometers of open ocean, then cross the continental shelf, enter the estuary, and move upstream through fresh water for hundreds of kilometers, leaping waterfalls, fighting currents, using their bodies like fuel, burning through the energy reserves they built up over years in the ocean. They do this using the magnetic field, as sea turtles do, for the oceanic portion of their journey. But the final approach, the navigation up the specific river system to the specific pool, is guided by smell. Each stream has a unique chemical signature, composed of the specific combination of minerals, organic compounds, and other dissolved substances that characterize its particular watershed. The salmon memorized this signature as a hatchling, before they entered the ocean. Decades later, they follow it home. They spawn. They die. And their bodies, full of ocean nutrients, the proteins and fats and minerals accumulated through years of ocean feeding, decompose in the stream and feed the forest. The nitrogen and phosphorus and other ocean-derived nutrients are absorbed by the riparian trees and plants, carried into the soil, cycled through the ecosystem in ways that make the health of the forest dependent on the salmon, and the salmon dependent on the forest for the clean water and shade their eggs require. The forest and the sea, connected by the salmon's extraordinary journey. Humpback whales migrate between cold, productive feeding grounds near the poles and warm, sheltered breeding grounds in the tropics, a journey of 6,000 kilometers or more, made twice a year, with no feeding during the migration. They arrive at the breeding grounds having burned through a significant fraction of their body mass on the journey, and they leave again for the poles as soon as breeding and calf rearing are complete. During the migration and at the breeding grounds, the males sing. Humpback whale song is one of the most extraordinary phenomena in the natural world. It is long. A single song can last 20 or 30 minutes. And a whale will sing it continuously for hours, repeating it over and over. It is complex, made up of distinct phrases arranged into themes, with the themes assembled into a song that follows a consistent structure. And it changes. Each year, the humpback whales in a given ocean basin sing a slightly different version of the previous year's song. New phrases introduced, old ones dropped, the structure subtly modified. The changes spread through the population as whales hear each other and incorporate the innovations into their own singing. By the end of the breeding season, all the males in the population are singing the same new version of the song. This is cultural transmission. The passing of learned information from individual to individual, shaping a shared repertoire that changes over time. It is, by any reasonable definition, a form of culture, and it has been occurring in humpback whale populations for millions of years, long before the word culture was coined by the species that invented it. The ocean is full of creatures that seem to have been invented by someone with no particular regard for the limits of biological possibility. Let us visit a few of them as you drift closer to sleep. The mantis shrimp. Barely the length of your hand, living in burrows in shallow tropical seafloors, the mantis shrimp is among the most formidable predators in the ocean relative to its size. Its hunting club, a spring-loaded appendage that unfolds in a strike lasting less than 0.003 of a second, accelerates faster than a bullet leaving a gun barrel. The impact is so powerful that it creates a cavitation bubble in the water, a region of near vacuum that, when it collapses, produces a flash of light and a pressure wave capable of stunning or killing prey even when the club itself misses. The force generated is extraordinary. Mantis shrimp regularly crack the shells of crabs and clams thick enough to withstand the strike of a hammer. They break aquarium glass. Researchers who handle them must wear protective equipment. The clubs of mantis shrimp are built on a structural principle that aerospace engineers have studied and are attempting to replicate in impact-resistant materials for aircraft and vehicle armor. But the mantis shrimp's vision is equally astonishing. Where humans have 3 types of color receptor, the mantis shrimp has 16. Its compound eyes move independently, each capable of determining depth independently. It can detect ultraviolet and infrared light, and polarized light. It sees a version of the world so different from ours that we lack the conceptual vocabulary to describe what it experiences. Research suggests that the mantis shrimp does not process color the way we do, comparing signals between different receptor types to identify complex color combinations. Instead, it may use its receptors as rapid recognition labels, identifying specific colors instantly from a single receptor type signal without comparison. This is not a cruder system. It is a different system, optimized for speed at the cost of fine discrimination, the visual equivalent of a keyboard shortcut rather than a full calculation. Evolution did not arrive at human vision as its final destination. It arrived at an enormous variety of ways of seeing the world, each adapted to the specific needs and environments of the creature that possesses it. The mantis shrimp sees a version of reality that we cannot access, and its reality is no less valid than ours. The octopus is perhaps the most alien intelligence on Earth. Not alien in the sense of being hostile or threatening, alien in the sense of being genuinely other, genuinely different in its architecture and its approach to the world. 2/3 of an octopus's neurons are not in its central brain but distributed through its 8 arms. Each arm can act semi-independently, carrying out complex tasks without continuous instruction from the central brain, solving local problems with local intelligence. An octopus's arm, severed from its body, will continue to behave purposefully for up to an hour, reaching for and grasping objects, responding to stimuli, an arm with a mind of its own. Octopuses solve problems. They open jars, navigate mazes, recognize individual humans, play. Their ability to learn and remember is extraordinary for an animal with such a short lifespan. They have been observed planning, hiding a coconut shell and then returning to retrieve it later for use as portable shelter, a behavior that requires the ability to anticipate a future need and act in the present to prepare for it. Their camouflage is perhaps their most spectacular ability. The chromatophores, pigment cells, covering their skin can be expanded or contracted individually in milliseconds, allowing the octopus to change the color and pattern of its entire body surface almost instantaneously. Papillae under the skin can be raised or lowered to change texture, from smooth to spiky in a second. The combination produces camouflage of literally photographic accuracy, matching not just the color but the texture and pattern of the substrate in real time. An octopus can become a rock. Not look like a rock, become one, perceptually, from the perspective of any creature trying to find it. It can hold this transformation perfectly for as long as necessary, then in a fraction of a second, transform into something entirely different, a threat display of spreading arms and flashing warning colors, and then vanish again. and they can do this while also being completely colorblind. The photoreceptors in an octopus's eyes are of a single type. They cannot distinguish between different wavelengths of light, and therefore cannot see color the way creatures with multiple receptor types do. Yet their camouflage is perfectly color-matched to their environment. How? One possibility that researchers are investigating is that the octopus uses the pupil of its eye as a kind of spectrometer. The unusual W-shaped pupil of some species may allow different amounts of light from different angles to reach the single type of photoreceptor, providing enough information for the brain to reconstruct color despite the apparent limitation of a single receptor type. It would be like seeing color through the fringe effects of a narrow filter rather than through a dedicated color channel. It is, if true, yet another case of the ocean finding a solution to what seemed like an unsolvable problem. The pistol shrimp snaps its claw and briefly produces the temperature of the surface of the sun. This is not a metaphor or an exaggeration. The claw closes so fast, faster than a bullet, that it creates a cavitation bubble in the water, a tiny pocket of near vacuum that collapses in a flash of light and heat. The temperature inside the collapsing bubble has been measured at approximately 5,000 degrees Celsius, roughly the temperature of the sun's photosphere, the surface we see when we look at the sky. The flash lasts for microseconds. The area affected is microscopic. But it is real, measurable, documented. Inside a tiny ocean predator's snap, the temperature of a star is briefly achieved. The universe is extraordinary beyond our ordinary capacity to appreciate. Nudibranchs, sea slugs, are among the most beautiful animals in the ocean. They look like something from a dream, or from the imagination of an artist who decided that beauty was more important than any other consideration. They come in every color and pattern. Brilliant orange with white spots, deep purple with gold fringe, translucent white with scarlet-tipped appendages, electric blue with yellow edges. Their extraordinary colors serve a warning function, advertising to potential predators that they are toxic or that they are not worth eating. Some nudibranchs feed on sea anemones and cnidarians, and instead of digesting the stinging cells of their prey, they incorporate them into their own bodies, using them for their own defense. A nudibranch that has eaten enough anemones carries an arsenal of the anemone's stinging cells in the fronds on its back, ready to deploy against anything that bites it. They are, in the most vivid possible way, what they eat. The immortal jellyfish, which we mentioned early in our journey, bears a moment's return. Turritopsis dohrnii sits in the warm shallows of the Mediterranean, no bigger than your thumbnail, apparently ordinary. But it carries within its cells a capacity for transformation that puts to shame every story of regeneration and rebirth in human mythology. Aged, stressed, or injured, it does not die. It sinks to the sea floor and reverts, its cells transforming through transdifferentiation from the specialized cells of an adult animal back into the undifferentiated cells of the earliest stage of life. A polyp forms. From the polyp, a juvenile grows. From the juvenile, an adult. From the adult, eventually, another transformation, another return. It is not immortal in the sense of being impervious to everything. Disease kills it. Predators eat it. A physical trauma that destroys the animal entirely cannot be recovered from. But if none of these things happen, if it simply lives and ages and reaches the point where transformation becomes necessary, it transforms and lives again and ages and transforms again in a cycle that could, in theory, continue forever. Whether a jellyfish that has gone through this transformation is the same individual as the one that preceded it is a philosophical question that biology cannot yet answer. What counts as continuity of identity across such radical transformation? It is a question that recurs in many forms throughout the study of life, and the immortal jellyfish poses it in its most extreme form. For now, let us simply hold in mind the image of that tiny creature, drifting in warm water, carrying its extraordinary potential, the ocean's most elegant answer to mortality. The ocean is a solution. A very dilute one, mostly water, but a solution nonetheless, water with an enormous variety of substances dissolved in it, and those substances, and their concentration, and their interactions, are what make the ocean the extraordinary system it is. Seawater is about 3.5% salt by weight. Most of that salt is sodium chloride, ordinary table salt, but seawater also contains magnesium, sulfate, calcium, potassium, bicarbonate, and dozens of trace elements in smaller quantities. The proportions of these elements in seawater are remarkably consistent across the world's oceans, a product of the continuous mixing that the ocean's circulation performs over millions of years. The salt in the ocean came, originally, from the weathering of rocks on land. Rainwater is slightly acidic, and over millions of years, it dissolves minerals from rocks and carries them via rivers to the sea. The sodium and chloride that make up most of sea salt are soluble and accumulate in the ocean over geological time. The ocean has been getting saltier, very slowly, since water first appeared on Earth, though the rate is so slow that over human timescales it is imperceptible. The chemistry of the ocean regulates the chemistry of the atmosphere. The ocean and the atmosphere are in constant exchange. Gases dissolve from the air into the sea and outgas from the sea into the air, driven by the difference in their concentrations in the two media. The ocean absorbs carbon dioxide and releases oxygen. It takes up nitrogen and sulfur compounds and transforms them. It cycles nutrients between the surface and the deep. The ocean has been the Earth's primary chemical regulator for billions of years, buffering the atmosphere against extreme swings, maintaining conditions within the narrow range that life as we know it requires. Carbon dioxide absorbed by the ocean reacts with seawater to form carbonic acid. This is the process of ocean acidification, and it is one of the most significant ongoing chemical changes in the ocean right now. As the concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has increased since the Industrial Revolution, from roughly 280 parts per million before industrialization to over 420 parts per million today, the amount of carbon dioxide absorbed by the ocean has increased correspondingly. The pH of the surface ocean has dropped by about 0.1 units since pre-industrial times, a change that sounds small but represents a 30% increase in acidity, because the pH scale is logarithmic. For organisms that build shells or skeletons from calcium carbonate, including corals, oysters, mussels, sea urchins, and some plankton species, this increased acidity makes the process of shell building harder and, in severe cases, causes existing shells and skeletons to dissolve. The impacts on coral reefs are compounded by the effects of warming temperatures. The combination of warming and acidification represents a double threat to the most biodiverse marine ecosystems on Earth. But the ocean is resilient, in the way that something ancient is resilient, not because it cannot be damaged, but because it has been damaged before, in ways more severe than anything we have yet inflicted, and has recovered. The recovery took millions of years. But it happened. The ocean will not mourn us. It will continue, as it has through every extinction and every catastrophe the planet has suffered, doing what it does, cycling and transforming and sustaining, in ways that require no particular tenant on the surface. This is both a sobering and a comforting thought. Let us return, at last, to where we began. The surface. The soft swells. The sound of water. You have been traveling for a long time tonight, through the sunlit surface world, into the twilight zone, down to the abyssal plain and the hydrothermal vents, across the geography of the seafloor, through the history of the ocean and the civilizations that grew along its shores. You have met blue whales and immortal jellyfish and 400-year-old sharks and bioluminescent plankton and the impossibly beautiful, impossibly complex communities of the coral reef. And now it is time to rest. You are floating on the surface, as you were at the beginning. The water is warm and perfectly calm. The stars above you, if there are no clouds, are the same stars the Polynesian navigators used to cross the Pacific 1,000 years ago, the same stars that guided sailors home across the Mediterranean in ancient times, the same stars that are visible tonight from every ocean and every shore on this blue planet. The ocean does not sleep. It never sleeps. At this moment, in the darkness of the deep Pacific, a sperm whale is descending through 3,000 meters of black water, clicking its enormous sonar at the squid it is hunting. In the warm shallows of the Red Sea, a parrotfish is tucked into its mucus sleeping bag, its brilliant colors muted in the dark. In the Antarctic, a colony of emperor penguins is standing in the winter darkness, their eggs balanced on their feet, their bodies pressed together against the cold. In the California kelp forest, sea otters are holding hands. In the Mediterranean, an immortal jellyfish is pulsing gently, neither young nor old, neither mortal nor not, simply drifting. On the abyssal plain of the Atlantic, marine snow is falling, as it has been falling for billions of years, each particle taking weeks to drift from the sunlit surface to the cold dark floor, carrying the energy of sunlight down into the depth where no light reaches, sustaining life that has never seen the sun. The ocean is going about its business. It has been going about this business since before the first cell divided in the ancient sea. It will be going about it long after everything we have built and thought and created and worried about has returned to its component elements. This is not a sad thought. It is a freeing one. You do not have to hold everything together. You do not have to manage the ocean's chemistry, or navigate the whale's migration, or maintain the coral's symbiosis with its algae. All of that is happening perfectly and continuously, without your involvement or your worry. You can let go. You can sink as gently as marine snow, through the warm surface water, through the thermocline, through the blue twilight zone with its cold light and its drifting creatures, through the midnight darkness of the deep, all the way down to the soft sediment of the ocean floor, where everything is quiet and still and perfectly preserved, where the history of the world is written in layers so fine and so patient that reading them takes lifetimes. Down there, nothing is urgent. Down there, time moves at a different pace. Down there, you are just one more piece of the ocean's story, arriving gently, settling quietly, coming to rest in the oldest archive on Earth. Let your breathing slow to the rhythm of the deep. Let your thoughts drift like plankton, following the current wherever it goes, not directing, not resisting, simply moving. Let the ocean carry you. It knows the way. It has been carrying life since life began. It will carry you to morning. Breathe in. Breathe out. Rise and fall. Rise and fall. The water is warm. The stars are bright. The deep is quiet. And you are safe. And you are drifting. And you are almost there. Good night.